Okay, so with that lesson, it's a complicated lesson. When we come out and we get the procedural stuff out of the way really quick, but the first thing is not, okay, this is a lesson on angles. We're going to talk about math and right into that. It's always good to get some prior knowledge stuff involved there. But the first thing was, what do you know about renewable energy, right? Because that's something kids, hopefully they know something about it and they get excited. You know, there's almost immediately like a passion attached to that, like, oh, renewable energy is good, like pollution is bad, you know, I know these things, I've heard about this, I'm engaged, I'm excited. And then you almost like slide in the fact that like, okay, well, that's what we're talking about, but we need to talk about some angles so we can figure out this solar panel thing. So that was hopefully the idea, is like, okay, now I've got you hooked.
Exactly,
right.
The hook is what I was thinking, and
right.
I loved the line of questioning, just getting them to think and reflect, and it felt like it wasn't math.
Yes, yeah.
And
that's what
so
we do.
it was a great way to engage them, and thinking about some students who may have been less familiar, you know, they were still listening, they were still trying to figure out and process, and if they weren't sure, at least they were able to start listening in on some of the dialogue
right.
to help bring them in.
Right. And then we know with fourth graders in particular, very social. They want to talk to each other way more than they want to talk to us, you know, and so we try to keep the talking to a minimum. That's a tough lesson with that because, you know, there's just a lot of layers to it. But that we try that sort of whole release and come back, which we see often with the inquiry-based learning. But when I sent them out to the exploration, I made a really conscious, explicit direction where I was saying, you know, this might get frustrating, you know, you're not going to have the answer right away, and you're going to have to think about it, you're going to have to spend some time on it, and that's okay. And really that my expectation wasn't that in 10 minutes you're going to have this end-all be-all answer. It's in 10 minutes you might have some really good questions for me.
Exactly.
You might have some frustration that you found or some information you didn't have, and I think that set the tone for them to go and explore.
Exactly, and I think it helps set that expectation of, well, you're not coming back to us with calculations.
Yes.
You're not going to come back with calculations on your sheet ready to report out. You're in the thinking phase,
right.
You're in the processing phase, you're in the problem solving
right.
phase. And so I love how you were explaining that there would be the layers, but there will also be a process to this, and not to be afraid of the process. And it just really linked back well to what we're trying to encourage in the classroom as well, with the problem solving strategies
right.
that we try to introduce to them. And it just happens so naturally out here in this space with this lesson.
Yeah, that's a perfect point. I know we had talked about those problem solving strategies, restating the question, illustrating, and all that. And I think you're exactly right. When you're outside, we give them the opportunity to go and explore, and they find these things.
Exactly.
As long as we let them know that that's exactly what they're supposed to do, you know, like you're supposed to find problems and issues that arise, and then we'll use that process to deal with those. And you know, you hit the nail on the head. Fourth graders, you give them a math problem, the first thing they want to do is calculate.
Here are my numbers.
Right, here's my numbers, this is addition, this is division, this whatever.
Exactly.
And the whole thing with that lesson is, let's slow this down. We're not ready to calculate anything. We don't even know half of what we're trying to solve yet.
Exactly.
Right.
And so for me, I was trying to observe, you know, I knew that there were some students where those multiple layers within this lesson could have been easily frustrating for them, but they were still engaged, they were still curious about what was happening, and they were still challenging themselves and still thinking through the process, and they didn't seem as nervous about at least trying.
Right.
And so it was really awesome that even with all those layers, there was still a willingness to try, even from some of those students who maybe inside in the classroom may shut down right away. But they felt comfortable with at least trying, and then the feedback and, you know, the floating from the team to at least check in and do that temperature check to see how they were doing still allowed them to stay on task, and still engaged with the lesson.
Right. And you know, the way the lesson kind of wraps up with that tough evaluation question, you know, that question is so dense, but it's so much like a question we would see on like a park exam, you know, like all these different layers, and it's real world application type of stuff. They've got to pull from here and there, and so the hope is that with this outdoor experience, you're giving them something tangible that they were able to actually, like, you know, look and find the sun and apply that to angles and think about. I've been studying angles all year, but now I'm seeing what angles have to do with the actual world. So now you go to this problem that's very dense and got all these layers, and like, even though they struggled with it, my hope is that their takeaway is that they'll remember this experience of like, well, I remember when I was outside and, you know, we went and we actually looked at the sun, and then we actually drew it just like it was, and then they'll kind of remember that any problem, no matter how tough it is, I can try to relate it to something in my life that I've experienced, that I know about. And the more we come out here and do those things, the more kind of tools we're giving them for those tough questions.
Well, and I love how being in the outdoor classroom just allowed the multiple opportunities to visualize.
Yeah, visualization.
And so even if they weren't getting it right away, well, let's take a step back and let's visualize this again. Let's model this again and recreate this experience until we do gain some deeper understanding and knowledge about it. And so this outdoor classroom experience really allows them to make those multiple attempts until they really get that visual ingrained to help them apply and explain. And so I love how being out here and taking them through all those problem solving steps, the explanation at the end was still making sure we got to that piece of, okay, well, why? We want to make sure you're answering that why. So with some of the students that I thought may struggle a little bit more, you know, not letting them know it's not about being right or wrong today, but I want to hear you speak with some confidence about why you have come to this conclusion. And it just really being able to explain and articulate, you know, well, based on my experience and based on what I visualized and did in the garden today, this is why I'm coming to this conclusion. And still keeping that process spread out and making sure they're going through each component of the process. So I really enjoyed seeing that from the students today.
Exactly. Thank you. Well, any other reflections, comments, questions?
I'm just excited to see how, you know, this was a complex lesson, and just within the first couple opportunities that the students have had to come out here, that they can tackle these complex, layered questions with a little more ease than I was expecting. When I say ease, that willingness to explore and use the space to try. And so I really enjoyed seeing that from the students today, and, you know, didn't see much of that frustration. And, you know, it's probably the environment. I'm going to go out and at least try to use the space and at least try to figure it out before, you know, I get frustrated about it or say I can't do it. I'm at least going to try and use the resources I have out here.
Yeah, that's a great point. That it's like the natural draw is it is inquiry. You know, it's like it takes you in, like you want to figure out what's going on out here.
I do want to figure this out. I do want to try and be that problem solver.
Indoors, the pencil and paper, it's like it's kind of easy to get frustrated.
And I did reflect on, you know, we're introducing problem solving strategies indoors. And just through the natural conversation you were having with the students about, one student had mentioned, well, you can go back and reread the question. Yes, we do want to make sure we know the question, but we're going to use those illustrations, and not just at one point. The illustrations in trying to figure out the problem, the illustrations to help explain what we're doing. And once we've got those pieces, okay, now we can move on to seeing what does this look like with calculations. And remembering, we still want to explain how we did all of this, why we did all of this. And so, you know, it's aligning right back to what we're doing in the classroom, it's higher engagement out here.
Very cool.
So, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for doing it with us.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Excellent.